Chapter 7. Spending Galore. As soon as he got home, Ronin called Nagata. The faster he could get himself a proper VR capsule, the better. After a couple of rings, the image of his drug-loving uncle popped up on the holoscreen. Ronin, what a pleasant surprise. Nagata had black bags under his eyes, and he looked nervous. I might have to ask you for some help again, Ronin said, keeping his face hidden. What's going on? Nagata asked. Before that. Why do you look like you haven't slept for days? What do you think? His uncle hissed. 800 million credits, Ronin. 800. What do you think would happen if someone finds out? It'll be fine. Don't worry about it, Ronin laughed. We took plenty of safeguards. Anyways, seeing as I'm kind of indisposed at the moment, can you look for some available spaceship factories for me? Look for the ones that can install virtual reality capsules. Nagata twitched. What? Are you planning on spending it this early? That's way too risky. I need this fast, uncle. You know that thing we spoke about earlier, the infection? Yeah, it's getting worse. I need a solution. The bedraggled man let out a resigned breath, then nodded. All right, I'll help. It'll probably be safer if I'm involved with this anyways. By the way, your face. Why are you hiding it? Ronin hung up the call. There was no way he was going to answer that question. The last thing he needed now was for his drug-loving uncle to learn of his injuries. Who knows what that man would do if he found out? Ronin moved some of the dumbbells out of the way, then began practicing the Calvracian embrace. If this technique could help speed up his healing, why bother with anything else? All he needed to do now was to practice, and he'd not only get better, he'd get stronger. Alternating between studying and doing the stances, 2 more days passed by. Ronin's injuries didn't exactly make the stances easy, but the results spoke for themselves. His neck wound was now gone, and the hole in his stomach had shrunk. By the 3rd day, he was climbing back up the district's rooftops, looking for more bandits to hunt. He still had a limp, but his current condition was more than enough to deal with these guys. He'd settled on going out to look for the rooftop bandits due to the lower risk. The planetary guard didn't bother patrolling that area, and the thugs didn't use guns. Heck, if he was going to do something stupid anyways, he might as well do it safely. At least this way, no more people would die. By the 4th day, just as he was returning from another successful hunt, he finally received the long-awaited call. Ah, uncle, how's the search coming along? He asked over the line. Nagata adjusted his long bohemian robe, then spoke. Yes, good day. I've been looking into the various spaceship factories as you've asked. Here, I'm sending you a list. I've organized the factories according to cost, so it shouldn't be hard to find what you're looking for. Before opening the file, Ronin found himself a balcony to sit on. Hanging from a wall halfway down a skyscraper wasn't exactly ideal when making major life decisions. The premium quality ones look good, Ronin began. But do you know if any of these factories have access to the quantum net? If he was going to use virtual reality games to deal with the alien artifact, he'd not only need a large pool of opponents to fight, but he would also need the right game. If he could get access to the intergalactic pool, it should drastically increase his chances. So far, only the 2 most expensive properties have access to this net, but they are a little too high profile right now, I'd say, Nagata commented. Given that you're currently trying to hide your wealth, having the press showing up at your door is probably not a good idea. Ronin looked up the factories, seeing several news articles about them. All right, I see it now, he replied. They're from formerly famous companies. They caused quite the stir when they shut down. Indeed, if you look down to entry number 5, however, we have an interesting option. The facility has the capability of setting up this net, but currently doesn't have it. It also has a square-shaped warehouse of around 600 meters, both in length and width, which should leave plenty of space for whatever you want to build. The factory itself, being 300 meters long and 200 meters wide, is set up for ship construction, up to the corvette size. Ronin studied the factory closer. It was located in a good district. The least I could do is check it out. A few hours later, after settling on checking out the offer, both Ronin and Nagata found themselves in an expansive hall, being guided around by a salesman. As mentioned earlier, the facility comes with an ongoing security contract, providing protection against both robbery and surveillance, the tour guide explained. But all of this, isn't this a little much for just a factory? Ronin questioned. For another company, maybe, but let's just say we here at Xianxia & Co. have been facing quite the fierce competition over the years. It's actually the reason why we decided to sell our assets on this planet and move out. This factory looked more like a defensive installation prepared for war than a building constructing spaceships. The turrets, the number of guards, the barbed wire, there was so much of it. Ronin began wondering if it was even legal to have all of this. Here we have the 3D printer. It's a second edition Hazamaki S3, designed specifically for precision work for corvettes and smaller ships, the tour guide said, changing the subject as they reached a conveyor belt. Precision work? Asked Ronin. What do you mean? The tour guide smiled. It was almost as if he'd been waiting for that exact question. This printer focuses more on creating high-quality components instead of creating many cheap, low-resolution parts. This means you can theoretically use this machine to print out almost anything. For example, it can print out the components needed for an antimatter reactor. No normal printer even gets close to that level of precision. It also has several inbuilt and paid-for blueprints for common ship parts used in corvettes and shuttles. Finally, this specific model offers more manual control for the operator, making it a good match for our more precision-focused assembler. Learning how to 3D print on a more precise machine might be harder, but it should be more rewarding in the long run. Ronin's eyes shone with anticipation. For him to be able to make almost anything. And do these machines come with an instruction manual? Nagata broke in. Naturally. We also have an existing relationship with every machine's original manufacturer, so any minor issue you encounter with these things will be solved free of charge. Spotting a large structure at the southern end of the factory, Ronin exclaimed, "Is that an alloy compressor?" Indeed. Unlike most other companies, we here at Xianxia & Co. decided to focus on hull integrity. Although it requires more work, it's much cheaper to produce certain reinforced alloys in-house. Limping quickly up to the machine, still injured from the District 101 incident, Ronin's eyes lit up as he saw the acid bath. You even have a materials purification chamber, and it's primed with so many different acids. The tour guide smiled. You missed the cold working and heat treatment add-ons, but yes, this machine can pretty much get you whatever property you want in your alloys. But why doesn't the production belt of the 3D printer lead to the alloy compressor? As I'm sure you've figured by now, this is not a factory for mass production, the tour guide began. Each machine is, for the most part, its own closed system. That is, the different machines spend a different amount of time on each job. That's why, during a production run, we cannot do everything in one go. You would generally print out the parts first, strengthen the relevant alloys, then begin the final assembly. Ronin nodded in understanding. He wasn't planning on mass-producing ships to begin with. He barely knew anything about how to make them, and for now, he'd probably be spending most of his time learning the craft anyways. After a little more discussion on how the 3D printer and alloy compressor worked, they made their way over to the design studio. "This is a fairly standard studio," the tour guide said. "What we have done, however, is a comprehensive upgrade to its computational ability, allowing us to perform accurate simulations on how well the designed ship will do before it's assembled. In other words, before even printing out a single part, you can get an accurate model of how good your design actually is." Nagata had been right. Ronin had everything he needed here. With this factory being set up to be a small-scale, top-of-the-line crafting studio, he'd get to practice with the best machines. And if I actually manage to sell ships, I can just buy another factory anyways. There was only one thing left to ask. "Your website said something about being able to set up a quantum net here?" Ronin asked. Scratching his chin, the tour guide nodded hesitantly. "We do have the infrastructure. If you want it installed, though, it will double the price of the property. The quantum net is not exactly common this far away from the galactic heartland." Ronin's eyes lit up. They actually had it. After finishing the tour, he paid a hefty sum of 70 million credits, buying the factory. It was a lot, but with Ronin having over 600 million now, he could afford it. With this, the old owners would also install the new network for him. As for his VR capsule, Ronin decided on contacting a VR company called Real World Gaming. What made these guys special was how their capsules simulated the game experience in the real world. Be it through electrical stimulation, oxygen deprivation, heating, or cooling, their equipment could allow your body to feel, in the real world, what you experienced in the game. As for why someone would want something like that, well, VR capsules not only increased both the obesity and mortality rates of humans across the galaxy, it also caused productivity to go down, and it was all in all just a big disaster to human flourishing in general. The technology used by real-world gaming, on the other hand, made you healthier instead. You'd feel like you'd been beaten up every time you left the capsule, but it kept your body active. Not to mention how this also gave the capsule a higher neural resonance affinity. Ronin needed all of this. The more real the game felt, the better. Dialing up the company, he arranged for an installation of a capsule at the factory. Chapter 8. Fusion Repair. Amidst haphazardly strewn clothes, barbells, and blankets, Ronin locked in the third stance. He'd pretty much figured out how often he could do the Calvrakian embrace by now. If he really pushed himself, he could do the stances again every 8 hours or so. It seemed to be the minimum amount of rest he'd need before the volatile energy began causing damage. Every time he did the stances, energy flowed through his body, repeatedly tempering it. He was only becoming stronger and stronger. Even the 100 kilograms heavy barbell felt light now, and he'd probably have to replace it soon. Whilst waiting for the factory upgrade, he'd also worked on his mental palace. The internal model of the Goliath-class mothership, the Worldmaker ED-07, became more stable as he slowly began repairing it. Almost 10% of the damage he sustained when he absorbed the alien artifact was now healed. And to his pleasant surprise, as he healed his mindscape, his memories also became clearer and easier to access. As for the rooftop bandits, by now, Ronin had been forced to seek them out in other districts. After his frequent outings, they'd apparently fled District 91. There was not a soul to be seen up there anymore. He'd also tried finding an underground fighting ring, but so far he hadn't found one yet. Even after moving districts, The rooftop bandits had begun recognizing him. Each time he encountered a new group now, they ran. Regardless, that was a concern for another day. Putting on his academy suit, Ronin headed out to look for a transport ship. It was finally time for practicals. Walking over to the other side of the street, he entered a small shuttle, then paid the pilot. Ronin soon arrived before the academy, and as the ship landed, like a perfectly normal, upstanding citizen, he walked onto the grass-filled ground. He'd learned from his last mistake. Free diving out from the shuttle door was clearly not allowed. Passing the green, vibrant trees, he breathed in deeply as he headed for the ship hangar. Light sparkled in his eyes as the rare woody smell ran through his body. There was just something about the smell, something primal. Entering the hangar, he was greeted by a wide array of ship parts. There were anything from FTL drives, fusion reactors, and radiators at one end of the hangar, to computers, cables, cooling pipes, and atmospheric generators on the other. Lined up in between the juicy tech stood 49 students and a single teacher. There were new faces amongst them. Had some of the students quit? No, Ronin thought. They didn't quit. That terrorist attack 2 weeks ago had been devastating. There was no way 10 students had just gone up and left like that. Not here. They'd been killed. The teacher looked over at Ronin. "Mr. Maximus," he said, each syllable slow and deliberate. "I see you finally decided to grace us with your presence." The students began staring. Some chuckled. "Is that the guy who's been absent for so long?" One of them commented. "Isn't that the one with the perfect scores? He's definitely been using a ghostwriter. Only showing up on day 1 and getting 100% on every single exercise?" "Ha! What a joke!" a pompous youth scoffed. "Wasn't he supposed to be dead? Retired from the academy like all the others?" A voice hidden in the crowd questioned. Ronin also heard several murmurs on the strangeness of his eyes and scars. He ignored the chatter, then lined up with the rest of the students. Whilst half the students continued eyeballing Ronin, and not in a good way, the teacher patted his checkered blue and white suit, then cleared his throat. "Well, since there is a new student amongst us, I will repeat myself. The focus of this workshop is HSE, that is, health, safety, and environment. From factories to ships, awareness of the potential dangers related to equipment is paramount." Noticing some eye rolls from the students, probably for the second time today, the teacher continued. "You don't think this is a serious topic? Well, imagine this. You're serving on a starship, but something goes wrong. At that time, your actions may literally determine the life and death of every single one of your crew members. And you not only have to find out what is wrong with the ship, no. Every single life on that ship depends on you finding the right materials, printing them out as the correct components, then installing them without error. Further, imagine doing this, possibly, in the middle of combat, where every second you delay means 1 second closer to death. That's what this day's about. Space is hostile, ladies and gentlemen, and your arrogance here today may make the difference between those of you standing here now and those of you standing alive in 5 years. Though the teacher spoke with a monotone voice, he still managed to somehow sound both stern and aspirational at the same time. Furrowing his brows, Ronin considered those last few words. They were true in more ways than one. It wasn't only space that was hostile. This city was as well. "Now, if you pull up your Academy suit's information sheet," the teacher went on, "enter the section for radioactive measurements. and you will see the different forms of radiation your suit can detect. Let's start with Xianxia radiation. Ronin already knew all of this. He'd made sure to go over each type and how dangerous it was after his first day at the academy. Having seen the results of an entire valley being irradiated, he'd be stupid not to. As the teacher talked, Ronin snuck a few glances at his fellow students. They were still peeking at him. Sheesh. I can ignore a little staring and gossip, but these guys aren't letting up at all. Ignoring these students was apparently not going to be as easy as he thought. Ugh, whatever. Ronin pulled up a holoscreen, checking out the currently talking teacher. Ravris Ravent, 59 years old, employed from 3,381 to 3,390 AI as maintenance technician for XOR Solutions. From 3,390 to 3,402 AI, employed as executive manager for XOR Solutions, Landbound Division. From 3,402 to 3,421 AI, serving as head researcher of Landbound Transport, Ironglades Space Force Academy. At least I know his name now, Ronin thought as he read the holoscreen. Imagine calling him Mr. Teacher if he comes over to talk. He's specialized in landbound ships, I see. Landbound ships operated on very different rules compared to ships designed for space. They didn't have to worry about heat dispersion, radiation, nor the pressure of vacuum. They also rarely had an FTL drive installed. That meant there was a lot of room for new design solutions impossible for spacebound ships. As a general rule of thumb, ship designers specialized into either landbound or spacebound ships. FTL jumps tended to go bad when you were in a gravity well. The planetary atmosphere, electromagnetic field, and the gravitational interference caused complications. And a quantum jump, for instance, could even fail midway, causing half of the ship to end up on one side of the jump, whereas the other side remained behind. Something from a higher dimension might also come along for the ride. Heck, sometimes ships just disappeared, never to be seen again. Now! The teacher, or more accurately, the landbound ship researcher Ravris Ravent broke in. In your case, there are many things beside radiation that are dangerous. Let's turn to a specific example. Yes, let's start with a common reactor. Ravris looked over the students. Who can answer what the main safety risks associated with the KGC fusion reactor is? Neutron particles escaping the reactor, a bulbous, bald youth exclaimed with a markedly pronounced lisp. Who is this guy? And why is he bald? Ronin wondered. Could it be that he knows about this because he's been exposed to this radiation himself? Radiation could cause hair loss. Looking at the academy suit struggling to contain the short, voluminous figure, Ronin noticed a very clear double cheek. It was almost as if the bulging neck was fighting with the suit to get out. Not bad, Simons, but not quite right, Ravris Ravent replied. Neutron release does cause health risks, but you'd have to be working alongside a fusion reactor for years before the radiation becomes an issue. Anyone else? Destabilization of the magnetic field can lead to a containment failure, a prim, brown-haired girl pointed out. Yes, good point, Anastasia, the teacher said. What contains the fuel within the reactor is the magnetic field. But if this field breaks down or deviates, it can cause the engine to not only shut down, but potentially even blow up the entire ship. We call this risk factor the robustness of the engine. Generally, higher-performing engines have a lower robustness factor. This makes it even more important to not make any mistakes when constructing high-performance engines. This also makes it necessary for skilled technicians to be working on those ships at all times, to monitor and correct for any anomalies that crop up whilst the engine is running. Raverus Ravent did a movement with his eyes, accessing his implant. "Oh," the girl said, 10 bonus points. Displays of excellence are generously rewarded in our practical programs. It is for that reason we have added the S grade for practical courses and practical courses alone. Here, your final grades will depend not only on your performance during tests, but your work throughout the course itself. Raverus showed a slight smile. Anyone else? Many raised their hands, but in the end, no one was given any more bonus points. The hearts of the students, however, had been ignited. As the lesson moved on, Raverus pointed to the several assembly machines lined up against the eastern wall. The assignment for today will be to identify the faults in 10 different fusion reactors, then repair them. Finally, we will activate these reactors and find out who of you have a future in spaceship design and who does not. You have 8 hours. Drones began buzzing about, bringing out several damaged reactors before aligning them with their respective assembly machines. This was it. This was the sort of stuff Ronin had to master to get off Concordia. He clenched his fists. As the teacher began handing out several handheld multi-scanners, Ronin's implant notified him of an incoming message. Almost all engineers work in teams. These will be yours for today, Raverus said. Ronin skimmed through the message. Hang on, isn't Simons that bald kid? I'm teamed up with him? Many of you are likely wondering what due to. Perhaps you've never seen this engine type before. Raverus chuckled, breaking Ronin out of his train of thought. But do not worry. No designer works blind. He then sent everyone a KGC fusion reactor blueprint. Glancing over it, Ronin saw that the blueprint detailed the reactor components. It showed their dimensions, their electrical parameters, their heat capacity, as well as a range of other things. Every tool needed for what I expect to be an excellent repair session has been provided. If you find a damaged component, query the drones and they will bring out a spare. Oh, and on that note, in case there's some greenhorns amongst you, I've attached an assembler instruction manual to the message as well. The teams grouped up around their respective fusion reactors, but Ronin sat down, beginning to read the blueprint. There's got to be over 800 pages here. How are we supposed to read this, let alone finish the repairs in 8 hours? Leave this to me, Ronin heard the bald Simons confidently lisp. My dad knows the curriculum administrator and had me practice on this engine type many, many times. Walking up to the control panel, Simons next began operating the assembler. Ronin, on the other hand, didn't move. To repair the engine, he first needed to understand it. Hey, what are you doing? One of his new teammates said as she marched up to Ronin. I know Simon said he'd handle it, but you can at least try to be helpful. Sorry, I was reading. How can I help? Shaking her head, the student spoke back sardonically. Start by using that multi-scanner. Just send the data over to Simons. Or is that too much for you, maybe? Not bothering to argue, Ronin got up and walked over to the conveyor belt. Seems I'll be tight on time. He now not only had to operate the multi-scanner whilst reading the blueprint, he also had to find out what was wrong with the engine with enough time to spare for it to be fixable. All in 8 hours? Sheesh. It'll take a miracle to solve this, he thought. But he'd be damned if he was going to rely on Simons for everything. Time passed as Ronin did his best to skim through the blueprint, and as the team kept troubleshooting, trying and failing to figure out what was wrong with the engine, Simons disconnected the reactor piece by piece. By the time 2 hours had gone by, 60% of the reactor had been disassembled, and Ronin looked around the hangar. It seemed the other teams were far behind. At most, they've disconnected 25% of their components. At least Simons is fast. He's got that going for him. Surprisingly, the prim girl, Anastasia, had only disassembled 10% of her reactor. Shrugging his shoulders, Ronin went back to his reading. By the 3rd hour, the reactor had been fully disassembled, but they were still no closer to finding out what was wrong, though. Also, Ronin was only halfway through the text. At this speed, even if I do find out what's wrong, there will only be 2 hours left to repair the damn thing by the time I'm done. He placed the multi-scanner aside, then sat down again, closing himself off from anything other than the blueprint itself. If they were going to make it, this would require everything he had. And as page after page scrolled past his eyes, Ronin's focus only grew. Faster! Faster! He inwardly chanted. Sweat began trickling down from his forehead, and he started multitasking, comparing the expected component specifications with the multi-scanner data he'd memorized. From having 5 hours left to do the repair, the time left trickled down to 4 hours, then 3. I know what's wrong. Ronin's face lit up in a big grin as he looked over at his team. They were also sweating at this point, but for a different reason. They were no closer to figuring out what was wrong. "Simons!" he called, and the bulbous boy jumped at the sudden noise. What? "I know what's wrong with the reactor. Is there enough time to put it back together again?" As the other team members were about to disparage Ronin, Simons spoke up. "With 3 hours left, we will be cutting it close. My personal best is about 2.5 hours, so we should be able to make it if we start now. But how can you know what's wrong with it? You barely even looked. We've got this in the bag then." With a slight smirk, Ronin began his performance. "Maybe I didn't poke around the reactor like you guys, but remember, I analyzed every single component you disconnected from the machine. By comparing them to the blueprint parameters, I found several components with values below the safety limits." "You mean to say that, with a machine containing over 10,000 different pieces of complicated tech, you compared every single piece? Each part of the reactor has several specific values. From heat capacity to electrical resistivity, there's at least a dozen parameters to account for. And you somehow compared all of them?" Tutting at their disbelief, Ronin sent over his findings. "As you can see, the values are off on these breeding blankets. The magnets containing the fusion reaction also show signs of damage. My guess is that if you analyze the properties of those magnets, you will find the reason why the fusion reactor is offline. Playing a prank like this on such an Oh, hang on. I see it now. There is definitely something off here," a female team member commented. "This deviation, it looks like heat damage," another added. Simons's eyes lit up and he began to proudly explain, his lisp still very much evident. "My father told me about how these types of reactors often suffer from wear and tear. Also, if you crank up the output too much, it damages the heat buffer. A damaged buffer means a damaged magnet, and a damaged magnet means runaway plasma, and runaway plasma means..." Yes, we know. The plasma will cause the reactor to explode, and you can say goodbye to whatever spaceship you're in," someone from the team finished. Ronin wordlessly thanked the man. Simons could be a bit much. It seemed the rest of the team agreed. That being said, though, the bald youth knew his stuff. Without him, there's no way they'd make it. They had the drones fetch replacement parts, and as time ticked by, 3 hours soon became 1. Ronin clenched his fists as Simons worked. Their main obstacle now was the clock. "There's still 10 minutes left. Come on, Simons, come on!" As the final minute was about to pass, the last component was installed, and the entire team let out a breath in relief. The reactor was back together again. Straightening his suit, Ravurus Ravant electrically brushed his hair to the side, then called out, "Time's up, ladies and gentlemen. Now who's up first?" Anastasia and her team quickly raised their hands. Why are they volunteering? Ronin wondered. By the time we disassembled 60% of the engine, they were at 10%, and we barely made it in time. As the reactor was transported into a blast chamber, diagnostics were run on it, and with a nod from the teacher, it was booted up. It turned on smoothly, humming calmly as its data began displaying. Be it radiation leakage, engine efficiency, or magnetic deviation, all values were shown as green. "Great job, Anastasia," the professor said. "From now on, you 5 will be called Team 1. You were the first to make yourselves known, and you did so excellently. Congratulations." Ronin could see the bright, prideful smiles on Anastasia and her team. Just how had they done it? "Anyone else?" Ravurus asked. Not a single student raised their hands. Apparently, Ronin's team lacked faith in what they'd just done. "All right, if no one else is going to do it," Ronin thought, then stuck his hand in the air. "Mr. Maximus, I see you want your engine tested. You're not playing a joke on us, are you?" The teacher chuckled, arching an eyebrow. "A joke? We repaired the engine, Mr. Ravant," replied Ronin. "Are you sure about that?" asked the teacher, amused. Simons and his other teammates seemed to be trying to hide behind Ronin's back. Some covered their faces, others looked down upon the iron floor below. "Sure, if the so-called Team 1 could do it. Why not us?" Ronin clapped back. He was used to much higher pressure situations than this. Some arrogant, highfalutin teacher looking down his nose at him. What a joke. Ravurus shook his head in exasperation. The rest of the class began to whisper and point. But Ronin was unyielding, and eventually the engine was transported over towards the blast chamber for testing. As various diagnostic programs began running, though, the teacher's eyes widened in shock. The reactor looked fine? Ronin's hands were shaking. This could only mean one thing. The engine was ready for live action testing. A digitized female voice began counting down. Engaging reactor in 4, 3, 2, 1. VZZZN. The diagnostic screen began displaying the engine's data. Less than 0.1% overall deviation from the blueprint standard. This reactor is running like it came straight out of the factory. Ravurus exclaimed, his normally monotonous face contorted in shock. It worked. I was right all along, Ronin inwardly celebrated. Simons's eyes lit up as he looked at Ronin with fervor. That was incredible. How did you do that? He asked. I already told you, didn't I? Before Ronin had the chance to elaborate further, however, Ravurus spoke up. You all, except Team 1, screwed up. Tell us, Anastasia, what did you do before you began to disassemble the engine? We first looked up how to run basic pre-ignition diagnostics on the reactor, she proudly began. Since we could risk an explosion, radiation damage, or any other number of issues, we first checked the blueprints. Exactly. Did everyone hear that? Ravris said. Never just start the engine. Also, what you don't do is, just out of nowhere, randomly start disassembling it. The diagnostics comes first. Always. If this had been an antimatter reactor, and you'd just done what Maximus's team did, we'd all be dead by now. Ronin mentally slapped himself. Of course. How had he missed it? It was so obvious. As for you, Mr. Maximus, and your team, Ravris began with a puzzled look. I still don't know how you managed to repair it. No engine is supposed to be repaired that way. Oh, that, Ronin replied. I scanned all the components, then compared those values to the blueprint values, sir. Impossible, the teacher snorted. None of you have the implants for it. If you did, I'd know. But if you don't want to say, fine. Regardless, I will award you both. Ronin's implant pinged, notifying him he'd received 20 bonus points. With the exercise over, it was time to do some networking. With his newly acquired factory, Ronin, along with Nagata, had made a series of employment contracts for when he'd begin hiring workers for the company. On that note, I should give the company a name. Quick Fix Spaceships, maybe? Or perhaps Smooth Solution Incorporated? No, let's make it simple. Ronin tapped his fingers in the air, filling in the final piece required for the contracts to be valid. The company's name, Maximus Solutions. Quickly passing from group to group, he asked if anyone was interested in joining the company. There was not much luck, though. With Anastasia, he wouldn't take no for an answer, but was eventually flatly denied. She'd gotten visibly annoyed by that point, so he'd stopped. Even he wasn't that shameless. As Ronin continued down the ladder of competence, getting rejected again and again, it finally struck him. Maybe his previous stunt was, in fact, not enough for the adoration and praise he'd expected. Both him and Maximus Solutions lacked credibility. Huh. Over the corner of his shoulder, he noticed Simon's. Had he been following him this entire time? He noticed the expectant eyes on the bulbous boy. It can't be, can it? Does he want to join the company? Simons did know his way around an assembler, and Ronin did need the manpower. When it came to the students who might be competent, Simons should also be near the top of that list. For some reason, though, the thought of matching Simons with the idea of working together hadn't entered his mind. Ah, Simons, didn't see you there, Ronin got out awkwardly. I've been here a long time. You talked about a company? Why do I feel like I'm being pressured? Ah, yeah. It's a small company seeking new talents for long-term loyalty. Are you interested? Simons picked his pockets, extracted an evaporation spray, and began spraying his neck, seemingly trying to appear more presentable. I might be very interested. When we were fixing the fusion reactor earlier, did you really memorize the whole blueprint? It's not a trick, right? No trick. It's part of the reason why the company hired me. Ronin lied. He sneakily made some small adjustments to the contract, then handed it over to Simons. The bald student became puzzled as he started reading. The employee is required to possess or develop a strong ability to communicate? What does that mean? He asked. Ah, that. It's a minor thing, Ronin replied. Don't worry about it. After assuaging Simons on the strange new clause in the contract, Ronin headed home. He'd aced the practical, acquired a helper, and soon the factory would be ready. Life was good. Arriving before his apartment, he opened the door. Click. What was that? He looked down, seeing a loose wire on the ground. What the dash, dash, dash? Boom! As an enormous explosion rang across the floor, Ronin flew along the corridor. Fortunately, his Academy suit's single-use energy shield had activated in time. It was still not built for something like this, though. And as all went black and Ronin's consciousness faded, the words of Ravris Ravent flashed past his mind. He'd been arrogant. He hadn't thought someone would do something like this. Now he was paying the price.